boyfriend and I decided yesterday to help my father move into my grandmother's house. My parents are currently going through a nasty divorce, and my mother has taken all of his money and sold the house. He was kicked out the day after the divorce was announced. My mother tried to keep us from my dad by telling us how horrible and awful he was. Neither of us like my mother, and she's a compulsive liar, so it was a no-brainer that we would help him with everything. My grandmother's house has 3 bedrooms and a large basement with a crawl space and storage room. My grandmother is the sweetest and kindest lady you'll ever meet and was super happy to have my dad living with her again. My grandfather recently passed away from horrible bacterial infection. He essentially bled out through his intestines after they burst. We were all able to say goodbye to him, but it was still a horrible death. We will never forget the smell of a bleed, the amount of blood one can lose, and the sound someone makes when they die. He had cancer which exacerbated the C. diff and had made it impossible to treat. For months before he died, my little cousin, 11 years old, my aunt and I had nightmares about a large black figure coming to take my grandfather away. The figure was always in the basement, and it was always laughing menacingly. Whenever any of us would visit, we would avoid the basement unless someone else came down with us. All 3 of us have had paranormal experiences in the past, and we believe we are sensitive about these things. The thing in the basement terrified us more than anything. I had a similar nightmare the day after he passed, however the figure already had my grandfather in its grasp. I hadn't been back to the house for about a year after he passed. The night before we went to the home to help my father move in, both my boyfriend and I had a terrible nightmare about the basement and the figure in it. I can't describe the primal fear that was elicited from the laugh of the creature. We went nonetheless. We arrived around 10 a.m. and spent all day unpacking the moving truck and getting my dad settled. We had dinner around 6 p.m. and I was asked to unpack some things in the basement. My boyfriend went with me, and we took down a bunch of boxes. The whole time we were down there, we felt as though we were being watched. It did not help that my grandma has a collection of Anne of Green Gables dolls and various other porcelain dolls in the room where we were unpacking. About 1/4 of the way through the first book, one of the dolls fell off the shelf onto the bed. We put her back up and tried to shake off the nervous feeling we had. We kept hearing thumping noises from the storage room next to us, which developed into banging and pounding. My dad came down to see what the noise was all about, and just as he entered the basement, the pounding knocked another doll off the shelf. His face went pale, and he told us to come back upstairs. As we were headed up the stairs, we heard laughing from the storage room. This made us all book it up to the kitchen. My grandma heard the laughing and said just ignore him. He'll go away. This made us even more nervous, especially when she would not elaborate. We were watching TV and getting ready to leave when we heard a loud bang in the basement, and my grandma asked us to check it out. She had been having troubles with her boiler and thought that was what had banged. My dad, my boyfriend, and I all went down slowly and very tentatively to see what the issue was. We opened the door to see a mess. All the boxes and jars in the storage room were tossed about, and in the middle of the room was an old-looking Ouija board. My dad grabbed my arm and pulled me back and shut the door as quickly as he could. He stormed upstairs and confronted my grandma about why there was an Ouija board in her storage room. Apparently, she has been trying to contact my grandpa. She was hearing and seeing things that she thought were signs that he was trying to talk to her. So, she got out the board that my dad and uncles used to use and tried to talk to him. The only problem is that my uncles and my dad had a terrible experience with that specific board when they were in college. They had been hit, scratched, their room had been destroyed, and they had heard evil laughter. They had done the Ouija board in the exact room it was in now. My dad explained this to us as we kept hearing things being tossed around downstairs. He said that he recognized the board and that they had burned the board over 35 years ago. My grandma's face began to drop as she understood that this thing was definitely not Grandpa. We then saw a large black mass gather at the bottom of the basement steps and slowly rise up towards us. We all scattered and ran out of the various exits of the house away from this thing. My grandma was inconsolable because she finally realized that it was not my grandfather and because it felt like it wanted to do us harm. My grandma has lived in this house for 50 years and has raised 3 boys here. She has never experienced evil the way it manifested like that. By 9 p.m., we were all tired and ready to go in the house to try and get my dad and grandma settled for bed so my boyfriend and I could head out. We didn't have enough room in our apartment to bring both of them to our place, and we didn't want to leave anyone alone, so they decided to stay together upstairs, and we'd leave our phones on in case they needed us. We headed inside, and I went to go to the washroom. In my grandma's washroom, there is a large teddy bear that used to be my favorite toy when I was little. It would laugh and sing to me, and it was super cuddly. It was sitting above the medicine cabinet, parallel to the toilet. As I was finishing up business, I heard demonic sounding, electronic laughter coming from this teddy bear that hadn't worked in 20 years. I looked up towards the thing absolutely terrified and saw its head turn towards me suddenly. For reference, this bear never, ever moved. There were no animatronics in this bear to enable it to move. Even the stitching on the head of the bear should have made it impossible to move. I screamed as loud as I could, above the noise of the laughing, while this thing's head kept turning from side to side. The old oak door to the bathroom had locked on its own and would not budge, no matter what I did to move the deadbolt. My boyfriend ended up breaking the door down with my dad. The teddy bear continued to laugh maniacally for about 20 minutes before my grandma finally chucked it outside. My boyfriend and I got the heck out of there, and I don't think we will ever go back. I called my aunt and told her everything that had happened, and she told me she had a nightmare the night before about the demon figure in the basement eating me alive. I told my dad this, and he convinced my grandma to contact the local parish to do a blessing on the home. I have had my fair share of experiences with the paranormal, but this thing was utterly evil and powerful. I am very concerned for my dad and my grandma's health and well-being, but there is nowhere else for them to go. My dad's divorce left him destitute, and my grandma's other son owns her home and refuses to let her sell. From her reaction to the entity, I'd say this has been going on for a while. I believe she has invited whatever it is in because she thought it was her husband. She may have even ignored everything, believing she was going crazy until we all experienced it with her. It has left her emotionally unstable, knowing that it is something else, not Grandpa. Meanwhile, my boyfriend and I are shaken and a little scarred from that experience. We can only hope it didn't follow us home.